Big spoilers for Elbath, but in chapter 1182, Dreamo Shifu, killing him, the user of the Dragon Fruit mythical model Kirin, has made a nightmare creature of his own nightmares and the celestial dragon's nightmares as well, because he has summoned the rain deity Zaza in the form of a nightmare creature. With that being said, most likely seeing as how there was a nightmare creature of the Nidhogg, which led to there actually being a Nidhogg fruit, most likely there is a dull fruit for the rain deity Zaza somewhere out there in the One Piece world. Now, keeping that in mind, a very interesting topic that I don't hear many people talking about is gender dimorphism when it comes to Zoans. And I think this gets a little deeper when you're talking about mythical Zoans, because unlike normal Zoans, mythical Zoans can be actual individuals, set deities, or important figures of mythical status in the One Piece world. And with that being said, the difference here is that when you have gender dimorphism, it more so depends on the person or animal eating the fruit. And I wonder if there is a difference in traits with the animal, with those difference in traits correspond to the gender of the user. So for example, there is a bug fruit model rhinoceros beetle out there in the world under the use of Kaba of the Tontata, right? But Kaba, of course, is a male, so he gets to be a male rhinoceros beetle. However, if Kaba was a female, would he then turn into a female rhinoceros beetle, therefore not having the big horn that's often associated with rhinoceros beetles? I don't know if that would make the fruit useless, but that's something to think about. So keeping that in mind, when you're talking about mythical Zoans, I do wonder, do they change the gender of the user in question if the figure is traditionally the opposite gender of the user of the fruit? So in the Road to Laugh Tale, they do mention that mythical Zoans have the properties of paramecia fruits, and we do have a few paramecia fruits now that do change the gender of the target and the user, like the clone fruit, the hormone fruit, or the sick fruit. So with that being said, I could see that as a possibility, especially for mythical Zoans, if that's the case, and if the figure in question is always tied to a specific gender in lore. So for example, Emu's fruit. I don't think Emu in their normal state has a male body. I think they're traditionally a female, but their fruit turns them into a male. Now with Zaza, I think that's the case as well, seeing as how in chapter 1182, Zaza seems to be a female, and most likely they're always perceived as a female. So whomever eats the fruit, regardless of gender, will turn into a female version of themselves. I think that's highly possible. That's not necessarily a rule yet, but I do think that's going to come into the forefront in the future as we get more and more in depth about how these mythical Zoans work. I'm not saying that's the case with every mythical Zoan, because most mythical Zoans are just animals or demons with no ties to gender, right? But I do think there are some who are specifically one gender in their lore. So the user has to adhere to whatever the lore of that deity is when they eat the fruit. Therefore, if they are the opposite gender to said deity or figure, they will become that gender. At least that's what I'm thinking moving forward. And I think we might get a reveal with that with Emu themselves. But with that being said, if you're enjoying the video so far, click the like button. And if you want to see more from me, hit the subscribe button, followed by that bell so you never miss a video. In addition to that, if you could, hit the hype button because it really does help. With that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede.